According to Andrea Kalan, the official representative of the U.S. State Department, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, member countries are prepared to offer long-term military and other forms of assistance to Ukraine. Speaking on the Freedom TV channel on July 11th, she stressed that not just the U.S., but all NATO allies are committed to helping Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to reaffirm the strength of the relationship with Ukraine and pledge ongoing support in a forthcoming statement. Kalin noted that the essence of the NATO summit in Vilnius is to showcase the unity, consensus, and success of NATO. She highlighted that despite Russian President Vladimir Putin's intentions to fracture NATO, the organization has emerged stronger than ever. It was previously reported that NATO is in urgent discussions about security guarantees for Ukraine. The US, the UK, France, and Germany have been engaging with Ukraine on this issue over several weeks and have reached out to other NATO allies, the European Union, and the G7. The increasing support from NATO members to Ukraine has elicited a warning from Russia's Dmitry Medvedev, the Deputy Secretary of the Kremlin's Security Council. He suggests that these actions are bringing the world closer to a third global conflict. Medvedev emphasized that these commitments from the Western Defense Alliance to Kyiv would not stop Russia from pursuing its objectives in Ukraine. He reiterated that Moscow has no intentions of ending its war. The Russian Deputy Secretary called the Western strategy a dead end, and he claimed that the possibility of World War III was growing closer. In line with the official Russian terminology, he stated that the special military operation would continue to pursue the same objectives. His remarks underline the severe geopolitical tensions and potential consequences of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. As the NATO summit in Vilnius concludes, the G7 leaders and the EU have proposed an open framework for security guarantees for Ukraine. This involves support such as advanced military equipment, training, intelligence sharing, and cyber defense. In return, Ukraine will commit to improved government policies, including judicial and economic reforms, as well as increased transparency. U.S. President Joe Biden has declared the G7's willingness to help Ukraine strengthen its military while it waits for NATO membership, and he reaffirmed that Ukraine's future lies with NATO. The president also stated that the alliance has become more robust and unified than ever before in the face of Russia's aggression. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky hailed the multilateral agreement as a significant security victory for Ukraine. He also expressed his gratitude for the U.S.'s continued support throughout Ukraine's defense against aggression. Meanwhile, at the conclusion of the summit, the possibility of NATO opening an office in Japan remains uncertain. French President Emmanuel Macron has suggested that NATO maintain its focus on the North Atlantic area, emphasizing that the alliance should not extend its geographical reach. He insists on the importance of NATO remaining a North Atlantic-based organization. According to reports, Russian occupation forces have launched 6 attacks on the Nikopol district in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast in the past 12 hours, utilizing a drone and heavy artillery. These attacks targeted the Marhanets Hromada and the city of Nikopol. A Hromada is an administrative unit designating a town, village, or several villages and their adjacent territories. It has been reported that no civilian casualties resulted from these attacks. Rescue workers are currently assessing the situation to determine whether the attacks resulted in property damage or destruction. This incident highlights the ongoing tension and conflict in the region, further emphasizing the need for continued vigilance and defensive efforts. In the late hours of July 12th, the Russian forces reportedly launched another wave of drone attacks against Ukraine, utilizing Iranian-made Shahid 130-131 attack drones. According to the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, out of the 15 kamikaze drones used in the attack, 11 were successfully downed by Ukraine's air defense forces. The attack came from the northeastern direction, originating in Kursk, Russia. In response, Ukrainian anti-aircraft missile units, fighter aircraft, mobile fire groups of the Air Force and air defense components of other Ukrainian defense forces were mobilized to repel the attack. During the current and previous day, Ukrainian aviation reportedly conducted almost 30 group strikes on Russian rear positions, military equipment, and troop concentrations. The use of the Shahed 136-131 drones mirrors similar attacks from July 11th, when air defense forces took down 26 enemy air targets. Notably, on the same night, the capital city of Ukraine, Kyiv, was also targeted by a drone attack. All air targets were destroyed by the anti-aircraft defense. Debris from the fallen drones resulted in some minor damage to windows and outbuildings of private households in the Kyiv region. Meanwhile, an attempt by the Russian forces to attack a grain terminal in one of Odessa's ports was also reported. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has publicly praised the alliance's decision to commence training for Ukrainian pilots by the end of this summer. This move paves the way for the subsequent delivery of modern F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. At a press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Vilnius, Stoltenberg revealed that a group of NATO allies have formed a coalition specifically for this purpose. The initiative is spearheaded by Denmark and the Netherlands, with several other nations also pledging their participation. Stoltenberg stated that preparations would get underway swiftly, with the pilot training anticipated to kick off by the end of this summer. This strategic move will later facilitate the delivery of F-16 aircraft to Ukraine. The Secretary General also emphasized the importance of providing tangible support to Ukraine beyond discussions, advice, and assurances. He stressed that the most immediate necessity is to supply a sufficient number of weapons to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced new military aid for Ukraine following discussions with various foreign leaders at the NATO summit in Vilnius. After his meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Zelensky shared via social media that Germany has agreed to provide additional Patriot air defense system launchers and missiles. Following his meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Zelensky announced that Canada would supply the Ukrainian army with armored vehicles. Moreover, a conversation with Australia's Anthony Albanese resulted in a commitment for 30 Bushmaster armored personnel carriers. In addition, the Norwegian Defense Ministry pledged to supply Ukraine with 1,000 additional Black Hornet drones for reconnaissance purposes. The Patriot system was first introduced in the mid-1980s by the U.S. Army and is currently being modernized. It is in use in more than 10 countries, including the United States, Israel, Germany, and Spain. The system covers an area with a radius of about 68 kilometers, and its radar can track up to 50 targets while targeting 5 simultaneously. Black Hornet drones are utilized for reconnaissance and target identification, are easy to operate and difficult to detect. These drones are especially effective in urban combat situations. Despite Ukraine's hope for an invitation to join the North Atlantic Alliance during the NATO summit in Vilnius, it did not receive such an invitation. Nevertheless, NATO leaders did agree to eliminate the Membership Action Plan stage for Ukraine in its journey to NATO membership, acknowledging that actual membership will not be feasible until the end of the war. In response to accusations by NATO that China is challenging the interests and security of the bloc, Beijing issued a strong rebuttal on July 11th, asserting that NATO was spreading its tentacles to the Asia-Pacific region. The Chinese mission to the European Union stated that the NATO Vilnius summit communiqué disregarded basic facts, distorted China's positions and policies, and deliberately discredited China, to which they strongly opposed and rejected. During the summit, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg mentioned that China, while not a NATO adversary, was increasingly challenging the rules-based international order through its coercive behavior. He specifically pointed out China's refusal to condemn Russia's war against Ukraine, its threats to Taiwan, and its substantial military buildup. The NATO communiqué emphasized China's attempts to control key technological and industrial sectors, critical infrastructure, and strategic materials and supply chains worldwide. It also accused Beijing of using its economic leverage to create strategic dependencies and increase its influence. Additionally, it claimed that the People's Republic of China employs a variety of political, economic, and military tools to increase its global footprint and project power while remaining opaque about its strategy, intentions, and military buildup. The Chinese mission retorted that China strongly opposes NATO's eastward movement into the Asia-Pacific region and warned that any actions threatening Beijing's rights would be met with a firm response. China's state-run Xinhua news agency asserted that the wars and conflicts involving NATO states suggest the bloc is a significant challenge to global peace and stability. In May, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida declared that Japan had no plans to join NATO, despite the alliance's intentions to open a Tokyo office, its first in Asia, to facilitate consultations in the region. The ongoing conflict in the Kherson region of Ukraine saw a significant uptick in activity on July 11th, with Russian forces reportedly launching 67 attacks, according to Oleksandr Prokudin, the head of the regional military administration. The invaders fired 313 shells from an array of weapons, including mortars, artillery, tanks, Grad multiple rocket launchers, rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs, anti-tank guided missiles, ATGMs, and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. The city of Kherson itself was targeted with 21 of these shells. Regrettably, these attacks resulted in civilian casualties. Residential areas, a waterworks facility in the Berislav district, and the building of the humanitarian headquarters in Kherson were hit, resulting in 1 person killed and 5 others injured, including a child. The sustained offensive by the Russian forces underscores the tense and volatile situation in the region. Ukraine's defense minister, Oleksiy Reznikov, has said that the use of cluster munitions could be a game changer in the fight against Russian troops, following the U.S. government's controversial decision to supply these weapons to Ukraine. He noted that these weapons will be used only in non-urban areas and that Ukraine's partners will be informed about their use and effect. Cluster munitions are controversial due to their wide area of impact and the potential for unexploded ordnance to pose a long-term threat to civilians. They are prohibited by many countries under the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions. However, both the United States and Ukraine, as well as Russia, have not ratified this treaty. Reznikov's statement comes in the context of ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, where both sides have been accused of using cluster munitions. In July 2023, Human Rights Watch, an international non-governmental organization, accused Ukraine of using such munitions, allegedly leading to civilian casualties. An explosion of an unidentified Russian military object in the vicinity of Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine has resulted in injuries to 6 people, including 1 minor. The report came from Oleksandr Vlasyuk, the first deputy mayor of Zaporizhzhia. The emergency department received notification about an explosion during an air alert. Among the 6 injured individuals, 3 have been hospitalized, including a child who is currently under examination at a regional children's hospital. 1 individual suffered a serious leg injury, having lost a lot of blood, while others were harmed by shrapnel. Local utilities services are currently working at the scene. Once investigations have concluded, the city plans to clean up the site. City authorities have already received several complaints regarding damage to nearby apartment windows and have begun providing construction materials for repairs. The specific type of object that exploded is still unknown, but significant debris and a small hole at the scene have been reported. Tragically, an elderly couple was targeted during a strike by the Russian army in Kherson, Ukraine. As reported by the Kherson Regional Military Administration, the attack resulted in a fire breaking out in the couple's home. The body of an 81-year-old man was subsequently found inside the building. The man's 82-year-old wife was injured during the shelling. These casualties contribute to the total number of victims from July 11th, when Russian invaders reportedly launched 67 strikes on the Kherson region. Overall, 1 person was killed and 5 people were injured as a result of the aggression, including a child. These events underscore the high human cost of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the risk to civilian life even in residential areas. It's unfortunate to hear about the explosion in the Rivne region that resulted in the death of 2 soldiers, with 4 more being injured. The State Bureau of Investigation has launched a pre-trial investigation into the incident. The explosion occurred while military personnel were demining the vicinity of a critical strategic object, and despite the measures being taken at a safe distance, the accident occurred. The preliminary findings indicate a potential violation of the rules for handling weapons, which led to the tragic incident. Investigators from the Pre-Trial Investigation Bureau are currently working to understand the exact circumstances of the event and conducting necessary investigative actions. It's critical that every measure is taken to ensure the safety of those engaged in such high-risk tasks, and the investigation will hopefully lead to actionable insights to prevent such incidents in the future.